Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about Chapter 3 based on the video review by Dr. Ely. My name is Sierra Jones. We're going to talk about a few things that stood out to me and explain how I can apply this to my future goals and profession. So, First, it's chapter 3 is really talking about the lit review and why it's important. So we know the literature review is more than just summarizing some type of an article. It's more so about synthesizing what you actually find. So just looking at different studies to find some theme or trend and gaps, meaning you're looking for articles that say more so of helping to connect ideas together to create a full picture of what's already known and what your study fits into in terms of the category. It also helps to build what's called a theoretical framework, which we kind of talked about a little bit last semester, which is basically looking at the lens, looking through the lens through which you look at your research topic. So you're showing how existing theory supports your study and how your work contributes to the larger field. Also, kind of talked about the quantitative and qualitative use, which of course took place in those first three chapters, and how the literature review different literature reviews are used when doing qualitative versus quantitative. And so in a quantitative research, the lit review happens early, so it helps define the research question and supports the theory. Later on, it helps like a person to be able to compare their results to past studies. In a qualitative research, it's more about telling a story. So you can review literature, but the focus is on how your findings relate to others. It's often at the end of the study in some sense, in cases. Also talked about the six-step process. So identifying the key terms is first. So start with keywords from your like the research question. This will help to guide that type of search. You locate the literature. So of course, like using different platforms like Google Scholars or ERIC to find credible peer-reviewed articles. Number three would be to elevate and select. Evaluate and select, and not everything you find will be useful. So just kind of focusing on those high quality studies, which we experienced that all probably through writing a literature review of some sort. Organizing the literature, so grouping articles by themes or categories, not just by the date. Then, of course, going into synthesizing those findings finding those types of patterns, what are gaps, what's been said over and over, and what may be missing. And then you want to look at, of course, writing the review. So putting it all together to tell the story that supports why that specific research matters. Next, I'm going to talk about what was new or interesting to me. One thing that really stood out to me was how Dr. Ely used the studying of frogs and started with one topic and ended up learning about everything related to it. So, like tadpoles, habitats, and other species. That just showed just how you go deeper into a literature review. Another thing that stood out that I learned was this the idea of the reference page in articles to find good sources. So just recognizing what is a credible source versus what's not necessarily credible. Um, I knew about that, but in looking at how it helps the research process and how you can categorize them based on those different types of findings also helps to be able to put certain findings of articles at the top versus those at the bottom. I also kind of learned a little bit more about Eric, and kind of dove into it a little bit more. I feel like that's a source that I could use in the future outside of using Google Scholars. Lastly, how I can apply this to my future goals. Again, working in the education space for a company, understanding like the research side of it and being able to categorize the literature that I find is important. Um, understanding those six-step process. We have an activity that is called the six-step process, so now it all makes sense, and it definitely makes the connection for me in terms of organizing my literature reviews. It's like a roadmap to follow, and that's what we kind of help students use to write business plans. And then it also just understanding the annotated bibliographies to start doing those early in the project, and we did that in last semester's course, which in doing those annotated bibliographies just allows for short summaries to be made so that I don't have to go back and remember what I exactly read or even kind of skim through the highlights that I started doing. And then also just how to find patterns and gaps. That'll help me just in this research and in this course in this program, but also in my career. Is just looking at patterns and gaps when it comes to education and how my organization can play to support those who are in education and using our materials. So thank you so much for listening to my chapter 3 presentation. Have a good one.